this is Tamara Kelly from Moogly, and in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the Spike Cluster Stitch Afghan, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. Please go to the link in the description or go to your favorite search engine and type in Spike Cluster Stitch Afghan Moogly, and it should pop right up. You will want to have the written pattern for this one because this blanket comes in a whole variety of sizes, all the way from a baby blanket up to a California king. And that means different stitch counts and row counts for each size. So you'll want to be able to print it out and follow along and make sure you're making the size that's just right for you. To make this pattern, I used two different versions of Bernat Blanket. Both are a 6 super bulky weight. However, one is standard Bernat Blanket and the other is Bernat All-in-One Blanket Granny. I used this one not to create granny squares, but to create this fun self-striping effect. You can use any two colors of yarn you like. It doesn't have to be Blanket Granny, but I think contrast colors are what really make this blanket pop. It's also, of course, important to have a hook. You'll need a USL 8mm crochet hook. This one happens to be by Clover, as well as stitch markers and your standard crochet supplies. Let's take a look at this beautiful stitch pattern and get started. Here is a closer look at the Spike Cluster Stitch pattern, which I've used to make this blanket. Here you can see I worked a stripe in white of single crochet, and then we have the Spike Cluster Stitch itself, followed by a few more rows of single crochet. Then we change colors again, and we have this sort of beautiful offset pattern of these spike cluster stitches. Now, they might look complicated, but really, we're just making single crochets. We're just going down into some other loops to pick up and pull up those loops of yarn. So I'll be demonstrating that here in just a moment. For this blanket, I did work a very simple border here, 3 rounds again of single crochet. I changed out to my contrast color there for the second round, but of course you can add whatever border you prefer, and you absolutely should use your own preferred colors. And here's a page from the written pattern where you can see not only have I given the stitch multiple, which is 6 plus 5, but here's information on all those sizes. So again, make sure you print this out or at least refer to it as you begin your blanket. But one more thing before we begin, I almost forgot to show you what the back looks like. This pattern is not, strictly speaking, reversible. It looks different on the back than the front, but it certainly has a very unique look of its own. And this is what happens on the opposite side of those spike cluster stitches. So now let's go ahead and get stitching. So we begin row 1 with color A, our first color, and we make a row of foundation single crochets, however many is called for the size you want to make. So here's how I like to start a row of foundation single crochets. You can see I already have my slip knot and then I chained 1. Now I'm going to insert my hook right back down to that 1 chain I made, yarn over, pull up a loop. That loop will become the chain at the bottom of my first foundation single crochet. So I'm going to yarn over and pull a loop up through that chain, and then yarn over and pull through 2. So now I have made 1 foundation single crochet. To make all the rest of them that I need for my size, I begin by inserting my hook under the 2 loops at the bottom of the stitch I just made. So whatever that previous stitch is, we go under that loop and that loop. They're both right at the bottom of that stitch. So we're kind of going into that chain to yarn over and pull up a loop, which will become the chain at the bottom of this stitch. So we yarn over and pull through that loop, then yarn over and pull through 2. So now we've made 2 foundation single crochets. Let's make 1 more. We go under the 2 loops at the bottom of the previous stitch, the one we just made, yarn over, pull up a loop. That will become our chain. So we yarn over and pull a loop up through that chain, and yarn over and pull through 2. So keep making foundation single crochets until you have the correct number for the size of blanket you wish to make. Remember, it needs to be a multiple of 6 plus 5. So after you've got row 1 made, again, whatever stitch count needed for the size you want to make, then we're ready to make rows 2 through 4, which are simply chain 1 and turn, or turn and chain 1, however you prefer to do it, and single crochet in each stitch across. Our beginning section is simply 4 rows total of single crochet. So I'll see you when we've got that part finished and we're ready to begin our actual pattern repeat. So here I have finished our first 4 rows. I worked 4 rows of single crochet, and then when I got to that final one, I went ahead and broke the yarn and finished off. I do want to remember to turn that after I finish that row. So both of our ends should be facing your hook hand. So now it is time to bring in our color B and begin our pattern repeat, which, if you're following along with written pattern, runs for row 5 through row 12. So here we're going to begin row 5, and I've got my color B, and I'm going to work a standing single crochet in the first stitch. Now, if you prefer to avoid this stitch, you can just join with a slip stitch and chain 1 and then work a single crochet right in that first stitch. But I'm just going to drop a little loop on my hook there, grab onto these ends, insert my hook right in that first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through 2. I'll call that my first single crochet right there for the row. Then I'm going to single crochet in the next 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, try that again, 3, and 4. So that's a total of 5. Remember, we did the first one, then 4 more. So we've got our first 5 single crochets, and now we're ready to work our first spike cluster stitch. We're going to be picking up 5 loops and bringing them all the way back up to this height. Now, this is the stitch we would normally work our next stitch into. You can see right here. We're not going to work into that one. We're going to skip it, but we're going to pull up loops from other loops all around it. So to begin, we want to go 2 to the right. So this is kind of our current stitch. This is where we start counting. We go 2 to the right and then 1 down. We put our hook right in there. We're going to yarn over. Now we want to do this kind of loosely. We don't want to pinch all this fabric. We want these loops to be nice and tall. So we're going to really gently, you can see I'm not putting a lot of tension on my yarn here. I'm going to pull. I'm going to pull back and forth because we don't want it to be loose back here either. You can adjust that if you need to. It'll get a lot easier as you go. But take your time and pull that big loop all the way up there. You can see it's not loose on either side. And we're going to sort of aim for that stitch as if we were going to crochet into it, sort of make that our goal. Then we're going to go 1 over and down 2. So we're kind of drawing a diagonal line. You can see right down here. Same thing. Now our yarn's just traveling this distance and back, but we still want to pull this loop at the front all the way up again. You can kind of take your time, keep them organized, keep pulling all the way up to the height of that previous row, okay? We're going to continue to draw that line down. Now we're going straight down 3. 1, 2, 3. It's a diagonal line. We go right down there. Take your time with it. It's an unusual move. Pull that loop all the way up, again, to the height of those other loops. If they're starting to become tangled back here, you can straighten them out, but we can do that when we're all done too. Okay, so we've got 3 of those loops. We've gone down. Now it's time to start going back up. So we're going to go 1 to the side and down 2. Start drawing that diagonal line there. Yarn over, take the time, pull our loop all the way up to the height of those other loops. Okay? Then this is our sort of our goal one. We're going to go 2 this way and down 1. Again, drawing that diagonal line right up. Yarn over and pull that loop up to match all the others. Now you should have a total of 6 loops on your hook. There's going to be one from each of those loops we just pulled up, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's kind of a little twisted back here, but you can see there it is. There's that 6th one. That was our active loop we started with. So from the top, it's a little easier to see them all like so. So now to finish it up with all those loops on our hook, all sort of pulled up nice and high, whoop, make sure they all stay. We're going to yarn over and pull through all of those loops. There, now I can finally get that little fuzzy off there. All right, so you can see that is how our spike cluster stitch is made. Don't worry, I'll be making quite a few more of those. Now, remember, this was our sort of goal. We were pulling everything up to this height, but we're not going to work into it. Our spike cluster stitch is complete, and we don't want to make our blanket any wider. We don't want to add stitches. We're working even, so we're going to continue to skip that stitch right behind it. However, because of the way this is made, if you look closely, you can see this is the stitch we're skipping, but this little bar likes to try and get in the way of the next stitch as well. So after you finish that, what you're going to want to do, just give that a little tug and make sure you can work right into that next stitch so you're not accidentally skipping over 2 of them here. You want to make sure you're skipping just the one behind that actual spike cluster stitch. As soon as you've got that spike cluster stitch made, then we go back to single crocheting and we single crochet in the next 5. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So again, if you get to the end of the row and you find, oh my gosh, I'm one row or one stitch short and I know I counted right, odds are good you accidentally skipped 2 of them behind that spike cluster stitch. Ask me how I know. Believe me, it's very easy to do. So now that we've got our 5 made, it's time to do our repeat again. It's time for another spike cluster stitch. So again, remember, this is our goal right here. This is sort of the stitch we would work into. So this is the stitch we want to make sure to bring everything up to, and this is the stitch we count from. So we start. This is sort of our home base. 2 to the right and 1 down. Right there is where we put our stitch, or our hook rather. Yarn over. This is this first one, so the yarn's going all the way around. We need to take our time and pull that loop up nice and high as if it was going to be the right height to go into that stitch. Okay? Make sure it's not too loose on the back. That's the only one we really have to worry about there when it's starting its journey onto the back. So now we go 1 over and 2 down, or we can draw that diagonal line right there. Go to the next one, yarn over, and pull that loop up high as well. Just like so. Then we go straight down. 1, 2, 3. Continue to draw that diagonal line. Pull that loop up really high. That's going to be the tallest one. We've gone down 3, so now it's time to move our way back up. 1 this way and down 2. Or draw that diagonal line right there. Pull that loop up nice and high as well. 2 over and 1 down. Pull our loop up nice and high. You can always check your work. If you realize you're making these loops and you've gone in the wrong spot, it's not a big deal. You can just drop those loops off your hook and do them again. Once we've got all 5 of those loops pulled up, so we've got our total of 6 loops on our hook there. Make sure that last one is pulled up nice and high as well. We can yarn over and pull through all of those loops, like so. Now, if your hook gets caught in there on those loops, one thing I really like to do is make sure that my hook itself, that hooky portion of the hook, is pointing down as I pull through, and that really does seem to help. Of course, once we've got that spike cluster stitch made, our repeat says to single crochet in those next 5 stitches. So we want to make sure we get that one that likes to hide back there. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that perfectly ends our row 5 repeat and our row 5. So we just keep doing that. Your blanket's liable to be a whole lot wider than this, all the way across until you get to the end. Then row 6 through 8, we simply chain 1 and turn, or turn and chain 1, again, however you prefer to do it, and single crochet in each stitch across. We're going to build up the field for our next stripe of spike cluster stitches to be worked into. You can see how it looks from the back. I gave that little peek before. Kind of creates this really interesting look. Obviously the wrong side of the fabric, but I think it is still an interesting look, and I will bet you there will be a few non-crocheters who might even prefer it. So let's go ahead and make rows 6 through 8 here. Again, just rows of single crochet. We are not increasing at all. You want to make sure you have the same stitch count in every row of this pattern. So whatever number of stitches you started with will be your stitch count for every single row. So I will see you when we're ready to begin our next stripe with row 9. So here I have worked through row 8. We even got a little bit of the color change in our Bernat all-in-one blanket granny. But now it's time to switch back to color A. Now, I should say, if you're using a long self-striping like this one, you could make the whole thing just in that and probably have just as much contrast. But I like working it with 2 colors. Again, you can mix it up and absolutely make it your own with your own color scheme. But let's go ahead and begin row 9 here with our color A. So once again, I'm going to start by working a standing single crochet right into that first stitch there. Let me get that straightened out. Again, I like to really just hold on to these tail ends to stabilize my fabric. I find it makes it a whole lot easier to get started with my stitching. There we go. So that's our single crochet right there in the first stitch. Then we're going to single crochet in the next 7. So that would be a total of 8. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, let's double check. We've got our first one plus 7 more. So first one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we can double check our work and see our next stitch lands us right in between those previous spike cluster stitches. So we know we're in the right spot to have our offset pattern here because it's time to make our first spike cluster stitch for this row. So we're going to do exactly the same thing. This is our next stitch, so that's sort of our goal. We start by counting 2 over, 1, 2, and 1 down. Insert our hook and pull up our loop. And again, that first one is one where we really always want to take our time because it's got a lot more happening there in back. And it sort of establishes the height we're going to pull all those other loops up to. So then we can go 1 over and down 2, or just follow that diagonal line. Pull it up nice and high. Again, now straight down 3. And you can see how that's landing right in between those other 2, so we know we're in the right spot. Give that one a nice good tug. That's our longest one. Now it's time to come back up. And one more. There we are. And in the written pattern, I do have a picture with all of these spots numbered for you to look at as well. But now I've got those 6 loops on my hook, so I can yarn over. And let's do this one together. You can see I'm going to pull up really nice and high on those loops. I've also got a good grip on my fabric underneath, so I've got a bit of tension there. What I'm going to do now is when I yarn over, there we go, you can see how I've pointed my hook down. And so when I pull that through, I'm creating a bit of space for myself by pulling down on the fabric and up on the loops with the body of the hook while I pull through with the hook portion itself. And that just makes it a whole lot easier to get through all of those loops at once. So that's our spike cluster stitch for this one. Of course, again, your blanket's going to be a lot wider, so you're probably going to have quite a few more. But our repeat here in the center of the blanket is the same. We do our spike cluster stitch and then single crochet in the next 5. So once again, you can check the back, make sure we don't go too far over, but we don't want to miss that stitch that likes to hide. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, of course, on our wider blanket, it would be time for another one of those beautiful spike cluster stitches. But if you're just following along here with our little sample, you've come to the end of your row. It finishes up with single crochet in the last 3 stitches. And that's exactly what we've got. So we know we've worked everything in exactly the right spot. So to finish off our repeat here, then, you might have guessed, we do another 3 rows of single crochet. So after we finish those next 3 rows, it's time to switch back and repeat rows 5 through 8. So our repeat is rows 5 through 12. Again, those last 3 rows here that I didn't do with you are just rows of single crochet. And that's really all there is to creating this beautiful pattern. Of course, the number of stitches will determine the width, and the number of rows you work will determine the length. For the border, again, I just did simple rows of single crochet, worked evenly all the way around the edge, but you can add a special border if you'd like. I think a twisted single crochet would actually look really, really lovely here. And of course, use as many colors or as few colors as you would like to make your own Spike Cluster Stitch Afghan. And that's how to crochet the Spike Cluster Stitch Afghan. Once again, that's a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.